We are now going to enter the library. We're in the library and we're here with John Byrne. John, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
Now, you oversee the ICC library. Tell us a little bit about how that works. Can anyone wandering off the street and borrow a book?
Well, we're in a... We're sort of getting ourselves started. We've renewed the library. It's a whole new enterprise. We inherited a library from the old centre, but very little had been bought since 2007. So we've been in the process of recataloguing everything and adding to our stock, trying to build up resources, linking in with some of the tasks and things that we've undertaken as a centre. So trying to integrate a lot more in terms of what we offer as a centre, as a cultural centre for West London, one of the only ones now existing, really. There's very little else available. And as a library, it's a unique and eclectic collection. We've brought in a huge amount of stuff. We've had enormous numbers of books donated to us. So there's been a very long process the last 2 years that I've been engaged in helping to re-establish that. Restoring books, relabeling them, updating the catalogue. And so we're delighted, obviously, that some funding has now been allocated to enable us to buy in a library management system, which is what we need.
We've got some money from various sources.
Not enough for me to go on my holidays with, unfortunately. So what can I say?
Yeah. How important is this to be able to catalogue everything efficiently?
I think it just means that you can have an online catalogue that people will be able to search for themselves, because a good deal of our resources are books which are out of print, which you could never buy again. We've had an enormous donation from St Mary's University, which are no longer offering Irish Studies courses. And so, of course, the books that have come from there, and including a huge number of academic journals, are items which we wouldn't be lending out anyway. But we want them to be available for people to come and do research by arrangement with us. So although there'll be a part of the collection that will be a lending section, and there's huge amounts of popular fiction, and we've added into that partly through all the donations we've had. Some of it will actually be for research purposes, and it will link in with other projects that we want to do. We want to set up family searches, enabling people to search from the diaspora their family trees and so on. So we've got a number of projects that we're planning for that. We've linked in with a number of things to do with photographic exhibitions, so we have displays upstairs and down here.
It's a fantastic resource, particularly for the London Irish people.
Yes, we have a growing poetry collection. We've got a phenomenal amount of drama material that we've had, and we've had huge donations, haven't we, from people, lots of people. There's a lady called Clodagh Corcoran who's donated a huge amount of her fiction, and that filled a huge gap in what we hadn't had bought since 2007. Bernard Canavan, who, as we know, has displayed a number of his fantastic paintings here. He's donated a huge collection of his own, including many of his wonderful art books. And covering all of those and being able to display them is really very important. So we need to buy in more bookcases in order to be able to do justice to those fantastic collections that we've had as well.
Extraordinary job running the library. He's just working every day, late hours. He just does so much.
Mostly
so
sleeping
committed.
in the library, but they don't know that.
No, he's brilliant. Absolutely. We're so grateful for all the work you've done for us, John.
Thank you very much.
No, thank you, John. Of course, the Irish Cultural Centre is dedicated to promoting Irish literature, and as I think we mentioned earlier, on Saturday the 3rd of June, we have a show called In the Smoke, which features Pat McCabe and Timothy O'Grady with musicians like Mike McGoldrick, Dezi Donnelly, Cathy Jordan, and whistler Larry Beau. Yeah. And we are delighted to have with us John Mitchinson. Hello, John.
Hello, lovely to be here.
You have many, many credits, not least of which is being Chief Brainbox on QI.
True.
But you're here actually to talk about Unbound. You're also extraordinary publishing company, and you published Pat McCabe.
I did. I published Poguemahone, and I will be republishing I Could Read the Sky, Timothy O'Grady and Steve Pyke's
What does
remarkable...
Poguemahone mean?
What does Poguemahone mean? I think you know it's Irish Gaelic for "kiss my arse," which is very much the spirit of the book. I have to say, it's people sometimes misclassify it as a prose poem. It's not a poem; it's a monologue. It's a 600-page monologue, And in fact, the word count is a little lower than the 600 pages would make you think, but it is a monologue. And actually, one of the joys was getting Pat to record the audiobook. I think it's one of the great audiobooks. And for people who have difficulty reading fat books, just put it on as an audiobook and listen to it.
Wow,
Pat
amazing.
How long
doing
did
all
it
the
take for him
voices.
to read that?
It's long. It is a 13-hour audiobook, but
Wow.
Great value.
it is great value. I mean, he does the voices like no one else can. So yeah, we like to do audiobooks at Unbound. We've also got. I'm delighted to say that I could read The Sky for the first time.
I
It was
know.
first published back in 1996, when I was at a different publisher called the Harville Press. And the new edition, which is out in June, and copies will be available on the 3rd for the event, it's a collaboration, an interesting collaboration between Tim O'Grady, who is an American writer who spent a lot of time on the west coast of Ireland and a lot of time in London, is now living in Poland. He was a great friend of Dermot Healy, and Dermot Healy went on to play the character, the old
In the
man who was the
film.
main character in I Could Read the Sky.
Yeah, in the film.
Performance, great
in Nicola
performance.
Bruce's film in
Yeah, it's an
1999.
amazing film.
But Tim also worked with a photographer, Steve Pyke. So the book is it's two narratives. It's an old man dying in Kilburn, remembering his life, remembering his marriage, remembering that his brother who he lost, remembering his hard life working on the roads, but also his childhood in rural west coast of Ireland. So it's that, but it's also an extraordinary collection of photographs by Steve Pyke.
Yeah, they're amazing.
Amazing photographer, now based in New Orleans, staff photographer for the New Yorker. But they collaborated. And at the time in 1996, we were never really able to get Steve and Tim to sit down together and
Right.
make the book that they both wanted to make. And you know that thing about having a shoe that you've always wanted to drop? I've spent the rest of my life, publishing life, wanting to go back to do that. And the book has existed in various forms, but it was its last incarnation. It was in a small paperback form. It looked like a bad photocopy of a bad photocopy. You could hardly read the pictures at all. So we spent quite a lot of money redoing all the pictures. There are new pictures
Yeah,
in there.
that's
It's
right.
completely re-edited. And Tim and Steve are both, for the first time, this is the book that they wanted to publish.
New pictures.
Yes, there are 20 new pictures in there.
Great.
So it's a new thing. But also there is an audiobook, and Tim has recorded it with the great Irish fiddler Martin Hayes.
Wow, brilliant. My
So
goodness.
and you'll be able to see he'll be reading
Yeah.
from it. Pat will be reading from Poguemahone. Both
It's
books.
going to be extraordinary.
Both books do, I think, an incredible job of capturing that not often written about life of the Irish in London.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, you know,
the
post
history
sort
of the Irish.
Leland Bardwell and Jerry O'Neill's Godstead and the Bulls Pond
Yeah,
Road
yeah.
display. But both these books are very much set in that community in the late 60s, early 70s.
May I just say that the difference, if there is one, Tim's book is set in a 50s, 60s.
Yes, it is. It's a bit
London
earlier.
Irish. And Pat McCabe is coming in. They're all taking drugs.
It's crazy, psychedelic London.
Psychedelic.
It's basically
It's gone crazy.
it's a Kilburn squat, and there's a lot of drinking and a lot of terrible drug
But
taking.
some beautiful lyricism.
But amazing, it's amazing vision. I mean, and also it's a horror novel. It's as always with Pat. There's huge amount of kind of popular culture in there.
Yeah.
Anybody who likes, you know, prog rock of the early 70s.
No.
Well, it's plenty of that in there as well, and lots and lots of songs, lots and lots of songs, both rock songs and traditional songs. What he's done with Poguemahone, I think, is astonishing. He's sort of taken the novel and remixed it as a kind of it's a monologue, but it's also it's like a concept album. It's songs turning into visions, turning into very funny narrative. It's an amazing work of fiction and very.
He's a bit like William Blake.
He is. It's Blakean. I'll go with that.
Wow,
I'll go
amazing.
with that. And Tim's is a very different kind of quieter, but also incredibly beautiful. And a book that I think, you know, from Studs Terkel through to John Berger, who wrote the introduction, it's a book that has an amazing. We've got pages to Mark Knopfler, who wrote a song based on it. It's got an amazing fan base. So. Great to bring them. I don't think they've ever really done an event together.
No, they haven't.
On the same stage, and they're both in different ways terrible show-offs. So
Yeah, they are.
So it could be incandescent.
They're brilliant performers of their own work,
They
though,
are.
which is extraordinary.
They're also some great musicians
Yes,
playing
tell-
that night.
To weave it with Michael McGoldrick, one of the island's greatest musicians in
Yeah.
the world at the
Amazing.
moment. You're going to have him on stage with two great writers, and then you're going to have wonderful Dezi Donnelly, one of the greatest fiddle players alive at the moment. And on top of that, you've got the wonderful voice of Cathy
Yeah.
Jordan
Amazing.
from Dervish. And then you've got this young singer-songwriter, whistler, Larry Beau. It's going to be an extraordinary night. It's just...
I mean, we couldn't quite believe it when Pat said he wanted at his launch. He wanted a whistler. So we said, somewhere in the back of my mind, I have terrible memories of Roger Whittaker.
Yeah, I know.
Larry Beau is a genius.
Yeah, he is.
And it was a complete revelation.
Yeah,
So,
It's going to be wonderful. Get your tickets, everybody.
John, do you think there is a growing body of, if you like, London diaspora literature? Because there's such a rich Irish literary tradition, and yet, although trad music, of course, was reinvented almost in London, is the literary scene beginning to?
I mean, I think that's a good question. I think the answer is, two books don't make a movement, but I do think there is a sense that a younger generation of Irish people who are maybe the children of the original diaspora arrivals are beginning to write about their experience. I mean, London is full of different communities beginning to find a way of talking about their voices as immigrant communities, and I think there, I would love to know if there are more. I mean, when you come to places like here and the various venues where there are a lot more. It's amazing that you had Martina Evans on before. I knew Martina back right at the very beginning of her career when she was making everybody laugh with All Alcoholics Are Charmers. In fact, my wife still reads. There's a poem called Jaunty about a man coming home slightly the worse for drink and being overly familiar, called jaunty, which she uses to humiliate me on occasions. But I think there is a sense that maybe there is going to be more of this coming through. And speaking obviously as a publisher and not wanting to abuse your hospitality, but if there are people out there who've got books in this area, it's certainly something I'm interested in.
Wow.
Tell us a tiny bit about Unbound, because you're not a hardbound publisher, are you?
No, when I left publishing back in the early 2000s to go and do QI, I didn't think I'd ever come back into it because I got so tired with the battle, the struggle. All the money goes on a very small number of the obvious titles. So it was really a couple of friends who'd had books turned down, and they'd had this idea that maybe there was some kind of way that you could. Why is it that when you as a writer, you sold 10,000 copies of your book, you have absolutely no idea who those 10,000 people are? And those 10,000 people are most likely to want to buy your next book. So we started with that in a pub with a sort of, piece of paper thinking there must be a way through it. I'd just become aware of the first big crowdfunding site, Kickstarter, which seemed to me like a very good idea, plug your kind of... your talent directly into the people who want to buy and support it. I just could also see that you needed more infrastructure to make books. In fact, a friend of mine in Runham said, "I've just raised $10,000 on Kickstarter." And I said, "What, for that terrible novel you sent me last year?" He said, "Yeah, but now I need a printer." And I thought, no, this is never going to work. So we're a hybrid. We're both an independent publisher. We do marketing, printing, design. We do all the things an independent publisher does. But we have a crowdfunding platform as well. So it just means we've done over 400 books now over the last decade. Books that a lot of them might never have got through the commissioning process. And some have gone on to be, huge bestsellers. So when I'd heard it was actually from Tim that I'd heard that Pat had a novel, and he was, for one reason or another, he had not yet sent it out to anybody. So I got in early and said, "Send it to me, and I'd love to read it." I'd known Pat since publishing Dermot Healy back in the late 90s, and he sent it to me, and within a few hours you knew you were onto something. It was the Patrick McCabe novel I'd always dreamt he would one day write, the big, ambitious novel.
Wow.
Has he got another book on the way as well?
He has indeed got another book on the way called Golden Grove, also completely different, set in Dublin. Same kind of, 60s into 70s time scale. It's based in a theatrical agency run by 2 slightly kind of apparently amusing Englishmen. which turns out, of course, they're not really amusing Englishmen at all. They're vicious agents of the British state trying to undermine the IRA. And it ends up, it starts out as an Ealing comedy, ends up as a sort of full-blown horror, sort of, what's the Long Good Friday, gangsters, torture, violence. And you can still sign up for Golden Grove, which is the new one. We'll be closing that soon, but it's that will be coming out, we hope, in 2024. So,
Do you think, like The Butcher Boy or Breakfast on Pluto, do you think they'll be made into movies?
I kind of hope so. I mean, you'd have to be a very ambitious filmmaker to turn Poguemahone into a movie. For those of you who haven't read it, the narrator may or may not exist in corporeal form. That's a bit of a clue. Yeah. But you could, I guess, he's the master of the voiceover. Yeah. And Golden Grove is definitely filmable, very filmable.
Brilliant.
And it's great. He's never written a book set primarily in Dublin before. So
brilliant.
Looking forward to that.
Thank you so much, John, for coming in. John Bird, it must be fantastic as someone running a library to know that there are still publishers out there looking for the best material and not trying to flog some footballer's gardening book.
Excuse me.
Yeah, I feel encouraged. I should find that novel inside me that we all supposed to have been born with.
And the night on June the 2nd, it's going to be words.
June the 3rd.
June the 3rd, sorry. It's going to be words, it's going to be images, Steve Pyke's wonderful images, visuals, and music and song. It's going to be a tapestry. It's going to be so rich. Yeah, it's a happening.
Man.
Absolutely, yeah. Get your tickets.
Yeah, it's called In the Smoke, and it features Pat McCabe and Tim O'Grady. And it's on June the 3rd, and usual place to get the tickets?
Yeah. irishculturalcentre.co.uk.
And the books will be available on the night?
The books will totally be available, and e-books will be available if people... audiobooks will be available if people want to download them.
And Tim and Pat are going to do a signing afterwards.
They will.
So, yeah.
I might get my e-book signed. Thanks, guys. Best of luck with the expansion of the library.
Brilliant.
Thank you very much.
Best of luck on June the 3rd, John.